Hey everyone, this is College Football and Stuff. I'm here today doing a special, deeper look at number 23 at Auburn. All right, this is a really interesting game to me. Of course, I am an Auburn fan. I'll go ahead and get that out of the way here at the beginning. So I'm not going to pretend that there isn't some bias there, because there definitely is. But as you may hear in this video, that also may make me a little bit biased against some of these things. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to talk a little bit about recruiting rankings and overall talent levels based on the 24/7 composites, however much credit you want to give those. Talk a little bit about key players, at least on Auburn. I don't know a ton about Kentucky's roster. I'll talk a little bit about them, but I'm not going to go into as much detail just because I don't know as much. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm expecting from these teams, some of their stats from last year, and then I'll follow it up with some of the questions I have about each of these teams and then give my pick against the spread. So starting off with the overall talent levels on the two teams, at least according to that 24/7 composite team ranking thing. So I'm taking the last 5 recruiting rankings. So for Auburn, in 2020, they were number 13 in the country. In 19, they were number 13. In 2018, they were number 14. 2017, they were number 8. In 2016, they were number 7 in the country. So that is an average of number 11 in the country for Auburn, so just outside of the top 10 over the past 5 years. For Kentucky, this year they were 27. In 2019, they were 34, 2018, 32, 2017, 31, and 2016, 33. So that puts them at about 31.5 as their average, 31.4 exactly as their average recruiting ranking over the past 5 years. So you can see there is definitely a little bit of a talent gap there. And I think their overall rankings and sort of where people expect, I guess like national media people who don't look at these teams too closely, that's a big part of where that gap is between them. So some key players on Auburn's side. They have Bo Nix back. He was a true freshman last year, played pretty well, but played like you would expect a true freshman to play. He had some really good games. He made some dumb decisions. He played really poorly in a few games, a Florida game especially, for example. Anthony Schwartz, a wide receiver, fastest guy on the team, possibly the fastest guy in college football. I know there's maybe some other wide receivers who may want to challenge him for that role, but as far as a lot of people are concerned, he is the fastest player in college football, a junior. Seth Williams, Auburn's number 1 receiver. A big guy, able to make those contested catches, really like a lifeline for our quarterback. Has played really well. He's a junior. Sean Shivers is the starter at running back. He is a small guy, very small, but has looked really good. He was not the starter last year, was not even the number 2 guy overall as far as number of carries went. But he's a strong runner. He's small again, so he's harder to tackle. He can sort of power under people, it seems like. But a very strong runner, like the way he runs. If you watched the Auburn-Alabama game last year, he had a nice poster moment where he ran through an Alabama safety and knocked their helmet off. You can find lots of pictures of him knocking that guy's helmet off out there for a big touchdown on that run. So he is going to be the starter, and that's kind of a surprise for some people because Auburn had a 5-star running back it recruited last year who's on campus now, Tank Bigsby, and DJ Williams was the number 2 guy behind Boobie Whitlow, who was our main running back last year, who has now left the team. So he wasn't kicked off. He transferred, most likely because he was not going to be getting the start, and it was going to be his senior year. Going on to the defensive side, as far as defensive backs go, we have a very well-recruited guy, a highly ranked guy, Smoke Monday, as a defensive back. He is a junior. I'm expecting good play out of him. On the defensive line side, we have Big Cat Bryant, a defensive end. He's a senior. He played really well last year. I'm expecting him to play well again as an edge rusher there. And then in the linebacker positions, KJ Britt, a senior, and Owen Pepeau, only a sophomore, but people are really high on him. I'm really high on him. I think he's going to be a really, really good player for Auburn. Okay. So Kentucky, I'm not going to talk a ton about their personnel, again, just because I don't know a ton. I didn't watch a lot of Kentucky games last year. I don't know a ton about their players, but they get Terry Wilson back. That's a big thing for him. So he was a very, very good quarterback for them 2 years ago. Led them to a 10-win season, an absolutely amazing season for Kentucky. And he got hurt after 4 games last year, so he did not play most of the season. So they have him back. We'll see if there's any rust there, having missed pretty much all of last year, not having really the amount of time that you would want him to have to work with the team and get sort of back into shape with the limited practices and everything due to COVID this offseason. I imagine, so Kentucky is going to have a very, very good offensive line and defensive line. They, at least nationally, as far as people talking about them, I feel like they are very underrated as far as their line play goes. They're in the SEC, which is a very tough conference, known for having very tough physical offensive and defensive lines, and Kentucky is right up there with the best of them. They're going to have a good defense. I'm not sure about their wide receiver play. We'll see how that goes. They really did not have very good passing stats that year. I'm sure a lot of that had to do with having their number 1 quarterback out, though. So we'll see if their wide receivers look better this year with a more polished passer there playing the quarterback position. They also have a transfer from Auburn, Joey Gatewood, who left after a couple of games last season. Don't blame him at all for leaving. I feel like Auburn really misused him. He had a lot of players talking him up very highly, people comparing him to Cam Newton, which is really not fair, but it's going to happen anytime you have a big physical quarterback at Auburn. Now, since Cam was there, everyone's going to get compared to him if you're that style of quarterback. I don't think he's going to be able to play. Last I heard, they were still questioning whether his waiver would go through for him to play this season. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen in time, at least for this game. We'll see if he gets a chance later on. That would be really good for Kentucky to have him as a backup. I don't think he's going to start even if he gets the waiver. I think they're going to go with Terry Wilson, but he could get hurt. He got hurt last year, and it really affected their season, so it'd be really nice for them to have him as a backup. Now, Joey Gatewood may give them some sort of an edge just by having been in Auburn just last year, playing with most of these players. He at least, and being a quarterback, knows the Auburn offense very well. So we'll see if that has an effect. Now, for Auburn, there's a few things here. So Auburn lost a lot of players on the defensive line. Of course, Marlon Davidson and Derek Brown, 2 very, very very good defensive line players. Both are in the NFL now. Of course, Derek Brown being a top 10 pick. It's going to be hard to replace them. Now, Auburn does a really good job of recruiting on the defensive line. They have done a really good job of sort of just next man up replacing these defensive line players. But anytime you have two players of that caliber leave, you're never going to be able to replace them right away. Now, I think Auburn's D-line could be near the level it was last year in a year or two, but I don't think it's going to be there right away, regardless of how well they've recruited. Now, Auburn also lost a lot of players on the offensive line, and that's going to be the biggest question mark, I think, for the Auburn team is how well is this offensive line going to play? A bunch of players who have been on the team for a little bit but haven't been starters or have gotten very limited playing time. Nick Brahms, the center, is probably the one who has the most actual snaps, but they have not gotten a chance to play together at all as a unit, and because of all this COVID stuff, have not had a chance to practice nearly as much as Auburn fans would like them to have had coming into the season, because this has been an issue that Auburn fans have seen coming for several years. Was this year offensive line issues. Auburn has been slow on recruiting offensive line players the past few years, and we had an extremely senior-laden offensive line last year. Now, with that said, the offensive line didn't play great for a lot of the season. Auburn has had issues running the ball the past few years, which is a staple of the Gus Malzahn offense and really something that has to be working for Auburn's offense to work well. And a big part of that was the offensive line. Now, I think a little bit of it has been that since Kerryon Johnson left, we have not had really an every down SEC caliber back. Now, I liked Boobie Whitlow. I think he was a good player, but I don't think he was quite up to the level that Auburn needed as far as a number one running back in the SEC goes. So we'll see how that offensive line plays. Maybe they play well just by having some more talented players in there. But the lack of experience on the O-line, and O-line is especially susceptible to that. They need to play as a unit. They need time together to mesh, to learn how to sense when someone's having trouble, to get their timings down. O-line is especially important for them to have practice time, and playing time really is best together, and Auburn does not have any of that on the O-line. Now, something I haven't seen a lot of people talking about that I am really concerned with as an Auburn fan is not only did Auburn lose a lot of talent on the D-line, but we lost a lot of talent in the secondary. So 2 corners, one of our safeties, Christian Tutt, is gone. These were really good players who played with us for a while. Noah Igbenogany is looking good in the NFL now. He looks like he's going to be a good player over there, one of our best corners. We have some very, very talented players coming up behind them, but very limited practice time and play time in the secondary for Auburn. So that is the thing overall with the team. O-line and Auburn secondary are the things that concern me the most. Now, Auburn also had a new offensive coordinator come in. So we got the former Arkansas head coach, Chad Morris, who before that was at Clemson for a while and really sort of revamped the offense that Clemson is running over there now. And I don't know if he gets quite enough credit for that, especially after doing so poorly as a head coach at Arkansas. But I think he's a good offensive coordinator. I think he knows how to put an offense together. Now, the issue is Auburn has had good offensive coordinators under Gus Malzahn, and basically none of them have been allowed to run an offense on their own. Several years ago, we heard it with Rhett Lashley. Gus Malzahn was going to step down and was going to turn over the offense to Rhett. Didn't really happen. Auburn's offense didn't look well. He was constantly meddling in it. Then we had Chip Lindsey, and same story. Chip Lindsey's going to come in. He's going to take over the offense. Didn't seem like it happened. Seemed like maybe Gus let it happen for a game or two and then got scared and wanted to take control back of the offense. Then last year, it was his offense again, and the offense looked good in some games and pretty bad in other games. And now we have Chad Morris coming in, and we're hearing it all again. He's going to take over. He's going to have control of the offense, but I'll believe it when I see it, I guess. I would like to see Chad Morris have control of this offense. I have been burned too many times by believing that Auburn's offense was going to change, that Gus Malzahn was going to give up some control, and they haven't. So we'll see with that. Some things to look out for to see if maybe that's happening. More passes to the tight end. Gus Malzahn has not used the tight ends in the passing game, really, and has used the running backs in the passing game to a limited amount. Those are two staples of Chad Morris's offense. So if you see more passes to the running backs, and especially passes to the tight ends, that will be a good sign that Chad Morris is actually calling plays and designing the offense that Auburn is running. All right, so let's go into some stats. So for Auburn, Bo Nix, the quarterback, 57% completion rating, 2,500 total yards, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and 6.7 yards per pass. So again, he was a true freshman last year, really played like a true freshman. Had some games where he played really well, had some really nice throws, also had some throws that weren't so good, had a few games that weren't so good, the Florida game especially. And that completion rating, really like to see that over 60%, and especially when you consider that Bo Nix threw mostly short passes. So about half of those total 2,500 yards were yards after the catch. And the majority of his passes were short yardage passes. So I think when you went to passes of 20 yards or more, I think it was, his completion rating falls down to 33%. So only 1 in 3 on deep passes. Really need to see that improve this year from him. Want to see his general completion rating go up over 60, and want to see him do better in those longer passes. So running back, and again, this is Boobie Whitlow, who is no longer with the team, who transferred out. 763 yards, 4.9 yards per rush, 10 total touchdowns. So 763 yards, not terrible, but not great. Auburn really wants to see that lead running back get 1,000 yards on the season, and we have not done that since Kerryon Johnson was on the team, and Auburn's offense has really struggled, I think, partially as a result of that, because they have not been able to be consistent enough in the run game in order to open up some of the other things that Auburn likes to do off the play action, off some of those motion plays, really forcing other teams to focus on the run, opens up a lot of the rest of the offense, and we haven't been able to do that. Wide receiver, Seth Williams, the number 1 wide receiver last year, 830 yards, 14.1 per catch, though. Average, and 8 touchdowns. So really good play from him. Really enjoy watching him play. I think he is going to be a major weapon on Auburn's offense this year. Now, defensive stats. Pass defense, 213 yards per game, 6.1 yards per pass. They were the number 47 overall pass defense last year. Rushing defense, 123 yards per game, 3.5 yards per rush, so very good against the run there as far as averages go. The number 25 rush defense. Now, both of these are good numbers, but not amazing numbers. Neither of these are really championship level defense numbers. You really want to see these probably in the top 20, and at least both of them in the top 25 if you want to be a championship level team. Now, Auburn had a tendency, and it's been a thing under Kevin Steele, to give up yards, but then keep people out of the end zone. So bend, don't break defense has been sort of a staple under him. So we were the number 17 scoring defense last year. So gave up some yards, but kept people from scoring points. And those numbers are good for the 28th overall total defense. Now, Kentucky, I hadn't looked up some of these stats, so some of these were surprising to me as far as the overall stats go. Looking at, again, the quarterback and running back, it's sort of weird, and I had to split it up a little bit because Kentucky had that starter go out. It really messed with their passing game and also gave them somewhat weird numbers in the running game because they ended up running the ball with the quarterback a ton. But Terry Wilson, for the 4 games he played, had a 67% completion percent and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, which, again, not amazing numbers, but good numbers there. No interceptions, you always want to see that. 67% completions, that's a great number. Now, for the whole team for the season, they were just under 1,500 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions, with most of those coming from the wide receiver who ended up playing quarterback, Bowden. And that was good for 5.8 yards per pass, which really isn't great passing numbers. It's good considering everything else that was going on, but they really didn't throw the ball that much. You can tell by the total number of yards there. So even though they only threw it a little bit, they still didn't have great passing numbers as far as averages per pass go. So running backs, their lead running back had 826 yards. So decent, not terrible. Now the quarterback had 1,468 yards and 13 touchdowns, which is some great stats from him. So overall, as a team, their running backs were 5.5 yards per rush, and their main running back had 6 total touchdowns. So again, not amazing running back numbers, but okay running back numbers, and great numbers from the quarterback there. You can see why they didn't pass it that much when they were getting yardage like that. Now, these defensive numbers from Kentucky surprised me, and as an Auburn fan, have me worried. So, pass defense, 167 yards per game, 6.2 yards per pass. Good passing numbers, essentially even with Auburn there. Rush defense, 154 yards per game, 4.53 yards per rush. So really, that is where Kentucky's defense struggled. Did not do well stopping the pass there. And it's interesting, so like the yards per game number, the per pass numbers are almost exactly the same as Auburn, but they held people to a lot less overall passing yards. And I wonder if that's because teams were choosing to run the ball because their rush defense was so much worse than their pass defense. But so that is a number 62 in the country rushing defense, and they had the number 2 overall pass defense last year. So an excellent pass defensive team. But again, I wonder if those numbers are slightly inflated because they were so poor against the run that teams were choosing to run the ball more against them. They were the number 14 scoring defense, so again, better than Auburn on scoring D, and the number 20 overall total defense. So a top 20 defense is excellent and very difficult to do in the SEC. That puts them ahead of Auburn in total defense as well. So as far as last year's stats go, better in scoring D, better in pass D, better in overall, but worse in rushing defense. And we're really going to have to see how Auburn's O-line plays, if they're able to open up holes for the running backs or not, because that looks like it's going to be the place, or if Auburn wants to have success on offense, it's going to need to be from the running game. And that's going to be difficult because Kentucky has an excellent defensive line and is going to make it very, very hard on Auburn's young O-line. They're not going to be pushovers. They have the talent on their lines to stand right up against Auburn's, and Auburn is not going to be able to simply overpower or out-talent in the trenches. And I really think this game is going to come down to how those offensive line plays, and then maybe behind that, how Auburn's secondary plays. Auburn is going to have to shut down the passing game from Kentucky. We're going to have some of those younger, less experienced guys step up and take care of that. Going to need to try to get some turnovers probably, or force some bad throws from Kentucky, because if it comes down to just Auburn's O-line versus Kentucky's D-line and Auburn's D-line versus Kentucky's O-line, I think Kentucky has a slight edge there, if nothing else then from experience. So I think that is the biggest thing with these two teams. Kentucky overall has what the numbers say should be a less talented team, but they're much more experienced, and I don't know if this is bias from hearing about Auburn more, paying more attention to the news about Auburn. It seems like Auburn was more affected by coronavirus interruptions, had lost more practice time than Kentucky did. And that's an especially big issue for Auburn because they are such a young team, have so little actual play time in a lot of their starting positions, especially on defense there and the offensive line. We will see how much that affects Auburn. I think they lost about 2 weeks total of practice, and that is a huge issue for an offseason that was already cut short. So, going over all of that, Auburn, a 7.5-point favorite in this game. And now, if this was a normal season, I would be much more confident in that number, both for Auburn having more time to get together, to practice, and from the big home field advantage you get at Jordan-Hare Stadium. But the stadium's going to be at 25% capacity. Now, it's going to be all students for this first game, so they will be into it. They will be as loud as they can be, I'm sure, but it's not going to be the normal home field environment. It's not going to be the normal benefit you get. It's not going to be nearly as scary for Kentucky coming in here and having to deal with that hostile crowd because it's not going to be as much of an issue. Auburn also, the past few years, has struggled early on in the season getting its offense going. Its defense has typically played well from the start, but its offense has taken a few games to get going. We saw that last year where the offense really did not play well in the beginning, and then later on in the season they managed to start putting up some serious points on people. So it's an interesting thing, and I really do not trust Auburn to win by more than 7.5. I don't think that's going to happen. I would be very, very happy if it happens, but I think this is going to be a close game. What I'm worried about is something like a reverse of the Auburn-Oregon game to start last year. So Oregon straight up beat Auburn in 3 of the 4 quarters in that game, but just wasn't able to score enough points to put the game away, and Auburn came back with a couple of good drives and won the game. I can see Kentucky doing that. I could see Auburn looking like the better team for 3/4 of the game, but just not being able to be consistent enough, having drives stopped due to penalties, due to poor plays, due to sacks, due to the O-line not playing well, and not being able to put enough points on the board to put Kentucky away, where Kentucky can get one long pass in or one broken tackle from a running back to take it for a touchdown that could get them the win. Having said all that, I'm going to take Auburn to win this game. It's really tough for me to pick against them at home with such a large talent gap between the teams. But Kentucky is a good team. Kentucky is probably, maybe either them or Tennessee, the 3rd best team in the East. Which is not the East that it was 5 or 6 years ago when you had one good team maybe in all of the East. The East is getting better. It is starting to challenge the West, especially with some of these West schools having a bit of a drop-off now. And we'll see how, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Arkansas, how these teams look. But the East is on the way up, and it seems like the West is on the way down as outside of the top couple of teams. So I am taking Auburn to win this game, but not cover the spread. If you want to take Kentucky, I would take those extra 7.5 points. I am picking Auburn, though, to win, but not cover. That's it for this. I will see you next week when I do another overall all the games of the week prediction. If you're enjoying these videos, click the like button. If you think I have something completely wrong here on this one, let me know in the comments. Let me know what your pick is. If you enjoy these videos, subscribe to the channel, and I will keep making them.